Welcome to the very first episode of Murder by Numbers, where we use dice or a murder generator. Murder generator?
A number generator.
A number generator to decide what the theme of the case is for the week. The first case was number 21, nurses, though neither of us actually chose real nurses.
Nope, they're fake nurses.
Fake nurses, don't be trusted.
So I'm Lucy.
And I'm Addie.
And yeah.
And we are nervous.
We're nervous.
And soon she'll be leaving the state, so it's going to change.
Yes.
All right, so my lady is Amy Archer Gilligan, born in 1873 and was the 8th of 10 children. And 2 of those children ended up in sanitariums. Because that's a lot of good family stability there.
Exactly.
One brother, couldn't find out exactly why, but it's supposed to be suicide. And then the sister jumped off the roof in an attempt to kill herself. So, fun times. Great country. B105. She claims she was trained as a nurse in Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital, but the school has never heard of her. Very exciting. Not actually a nurse.
She faked being a nurse. Wait, when was this set again?
She was born in 1873, so 1900.
Okay, because that would never fly today.
No, and you could...
The records.
Everyone was a nurse. You could just be like, hi, I'm a nurse. And Bellevue would have said, great, you're a nurse.
Because every woman that was working was a nurse or a teacher.
Or a secretary.
Exactly, so...
you got 3 choices.
So it was believable.
So in 1897, she married a man with the last name Archer, and they had 1 child, Mary, and that was her only child. Thankfully, she probably would have killed more children if she had more children. Shortly before, they were both hired to take care of an elderly widower by the name of John Seymour in 1901. He lived for 3 years before dying, and Amy is not suspected in his death. He was just an old man. John's family agreed to rent the house to them, and they turned it into Sister Amy's boarding home for the elderly, but she's also not a nun. She's not a nurse. She's not a nun. She's just a bitch.
Exactly.
And if you see a picture of her, she looks like the latest villain from the Conjuring movies, and dead on. I wouldn't trust her. I would think she's out for my soul.
She's demonic.
Very demonic. And all the shade to demonic-looking people would not go to this home. So after about 3 years, the family decided to sell that home, and the Archers used their savings to buy a new home. And I would like enough money from just renting a home to buy a house, but whatever. And they called this new home the Archers' Home for the Elderly and Infirm. And each person that stayed there was an inmate, not a patient, not just someone who you took care of. An inmate. Great, we're in prison now. In prison with a fake nurse. My favorite. So there were 2 sets of charges. You could be charged per week, which was $7 to $25, which equals about $200 to $700 in our money. Or you could be charged for a lump sum of $1,000 for your life care, which was about $32,000. By this point, Amy was considered a paragon. She was doing massive donations to the local church just to get, I guess, more elderly people to move in with her. And she was seen as kind and great, and everything was wonderful. But in 1909, things started falling apart when a resident's family took the Archers to court for unsanitary living conditions. I assume everyone was just living
in filth, their own feces and urine, and just
probably wasn't...
I bet you the old people had bed sores from not moving enough.
Ugh. That sounds painful. So they took Amy to court, and she settled for $5,000 in that money, which is over $100,000 in today's money. Where did she get $100,000?
Wasn't it $163,000
yes.
Exactly? That's a lot. I think it was something like that.
All you have to do is not let people live in their own filth, and you get to keep over $100,000 for yourself. It seems easy.
Yep.
So in 1910, her first husband dies of kidney problems that he had somehow never showed before. Just out of nowhere, oh, your kidney exploded.
That's not suspicious.
Not at all. And apparently it wasn't to at the time, especially he died a couple weeks after she took out a life insurance policy on him.
Again, not suspicious.
No, why would anyone ever look into this? So 3 years later, she ended up marrying a man named Michael W. Gilligan, who was already an investor in her home. Like, he saw the $100,000 she had to pay out and went, great, let me just hitch my money to this wagon and marry her. But in 1914, he died of severe indigestion and heart trouble. And that's kind of known as Bright's disease at the time. And apparently you just died of tummy troubles willy-nilly all of the time. He left behind 4 sons from a previous marriage. And they had surprisingly found a will that just put everything to Amy and snubbed these 4 very well-loved sons.
That's going to become a theme in this case, right?
Just everything goes to her for no reason. Her last big misstep was going after a man named Franklin Andrews. He was 61 years old, and unlike most inmates, he was close with his family and still in good health. Like, he was doing handyman jobs around the place. He was doing yard work. The day he died, he was actually doing gardening.
Oh, wow.
So he just did a bit of gardening, came inside, and then just bleh. So he started becoming suspicious of Amy because he noticed the people who paid the lump sum started dying quicker. The people who did weekly would last years, but the people who did the lump sum would last 2 months at most. Alice and Lauren Gowdy, who wanted to move in, and within the next couple of days, Amy approved it. Though seconds before, she had no space for anyone. So before they arrived, Franklin drops dead, and so now his room is up for grabs. Franklin's sister, Nellie Pierce, comes in to collect her brother's items and finds notes from Amy to Franklin asking for more money. Asking for more money than, like, what, $500 a week?
Yeah, so she wanted more money on top of it.
And
from the gardener man.
Yes, the man who
who just died, who was suspicious of her. So she was suspicious of him, asking for more money, and he wouldn't pay her, and then he died.
Yep.
Okay.
And so his sister went to the state's attorney, Hugh Alcord, and said, look, definitely murdered. And he went, definitely not. Don't talk to me ever again. So she went to the Hartford Courant and ran an article calling the home a murder factory. So she went to the Hartford Courant and ran an article calling the home a murder factory. Brothers at 61 just die all the time. It's fine. The editor of the paper launched an investigation and found that at the first home, the death rate was about 4 people per year, which makes sense. They're old, they're gonna die.
Yeah.
But as soon as they got into the new place, the death rate doubled to 8 per year, and they were housing about the same amount of people.
Yeah.
Exactly. He said, yeah.
Exactly. He distracted me.
So right before we started this place was quiet. And as soon as we hit play, 20 kids showed up. Make it make sense.
It is 3:30.
Yeah,
so.
but why are they at the library?
I know.
This doesn't happen at Madeira.
Okay, but actually, out there, when I went to the bathroom, they have a bingo sheet, and they're getting free snacks.
Oh.
So I guess maybe this is a good thing. Like, keep the kids in the library, not in trouble.
All right. I'll allow it.
Same.
So for the first time, perhaps, in all history, the police decided to do something, and they exhumed 5 people, both the husbands, Franklin, and 2 other residents, and each person had a large amount of arsenic in their systems. So they were killed with arsenic. The police went around to check the general stores who had to keep track of who and how much arsenic they sold to people. And she purchased so much arsenic. And she said it was to take care of bed bugs, which she probably had considering the being sued from before.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need that much. During the being sued from before.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need that much. So Amy finally gets arrested and is charged with the 5 murders. But all but one charge is dropped, and I think it was for Franklin. And her attorney, she was found guilty and sentenced to death for that first trial. But her attorney, Benedict Holder, was able to get an appeal and said, like, you can't use the evidence from these other murders that she probably did for this one that she definitely did. So instead of getting death, she got life. And there was no prison for women at that time. So she had to go to the men's prison and just stayed in one little room. And a few years later, she was declared insane. And she spent the rest of her life just sitting in the little corner of an insane asylum, pretending to be an old woman just praying, little nice old lady, until she died in 1962.
I wonder why she did that, like pretended to be a nice little old lady if she knew that she was never going to get out. Like, what did she gain from that?
Maybe trying to still make it seem like she's insane. Maybe if she just prayed the whole time, she doesn't look... Because why would you want to go back to a men's prison? That's not great.
No.
Definitely should have 2 different prisons. Anyway, when the trial initially happened, she did try to pin it on the doctor for the home, known as Dr. King, and he had to be in on it because the symptoms of arsenic are red and swollen skin, new warts or lesions, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, numbness and tingling, diarrhea, and cramping. So all of that together, and he's there for, she's suspected of at least 20 people. All of that together definitely seems suspicious.
Yeah, especially the red swollen skin and the new warts, like that's not ignorable.
No, and it's also not just an upset stomach that killed you.
Exactly.
Julia. So he never got charged with anything, but she did get charged for one of the many, many murders she did. And does it?
Okay. So now I am going to be talking about the Lane's Angels of Death. So they were a group of nurses who killed their patients throughout the 1980s. Well, they weren't really nurses, but their names were Waltraud Wagner, Maria Gruber, Irene Ladoff, and Stephanie Meyer, who worked together at the Lane's Hospital in Vienna, Austria.
While writing Twilight.
Exactly, Stephanie Meyer. That had us geeked. So I'm going to begin by talking about Waltraud Wagner because she was the head of the group. So she grew up extremely poor and she took on a motherly role with her siblings from a young age. And her grandmother also lived with them, and her grandma was always sick. But she had these gross sores on her leg. Well, I don't know if they were gross. I haven't seen them, but like I assume they were gross.
Yeah, assuming. To us, they would be gross, and we are sorry to people who have
like sores.
But that's please get that looked at.
So she would like change the dressings on her grandma's wounds every day, and it inspired her to want to become a nurse. But she actually failed out of nursing school because she couldn't learn anatomy, which is like the most basic part of being in the medical field. So like instead she became a nurse's aide. So next, Maria Gruber was a 19-year-old single mother who was also a nurse's aide. Irene Ladoff was 21 and she was married to an abusive husband, so she worked at the hospital because it kept her busy. And then Stephanie Meyer was a 43-year-old, also a nurse's aide, and she was kind of like the motherly figure of the group. Even though she wasn't like the one in charge, Wagner was the head of the group. Meyer was kind of the, I don't know, like the mom friend of the group.
Mom friend. One mom friend.
Exactly.
Writing Twilight in the corner.
Exactly. So as I said, these were nurses' aides, not nurses, but they were required to work long hours, and because of a nursing shortage in Austria at the time, they were required to perform procedures outside of their scope of practice. So they were giving injections, giving medicine, and performing simple procedures that normally only nurses and doctors would be able to perform. So
I don't want someone who doesn't know anatomy doing things.
Like, that's just, like, not okay. Like, they were injecting stuff into people, and they were allowed to do it, even though they should not have been allowed to do it. And that, the injections will come back in a little bit. So, Wagner... Okay, so actually, all of these women worked in Pavilion 5 of the Lane's Hospital, and this is where the elderly and psychiatric patients were housed. On top of this, the women worked at night, which meant they had even less supervision than normal nurses' aides would. So they were basically working with old people and mentally ill people. So, Wagner was 23 years old when she first killed a patient. An elderly patient begged Wagner to help her die because of her suffering, and at first Wagner was kind of on the fence, but she made the difficult decision to help her, and she gave her an excess of morphine injection so the patient could overdose. So, like, again, she was allowed to access the morphine and the needles, even though she shouldn't have because she was only a nurse's aide.
Those are supposed to be under
like lock and key.
Yeah, even in the 80s, you were the head nurse is supposed to have them. How is a nursing aide just like give me 20 cc's of morphine for grandma down the street?
Exactly, and how did they not realize that there was morphine missing? It makes no sense. Like, there was such a lack of oversight. But Wagner realized that she liked killing since it made her feel powerful. So she eventually recruited her fellow graveyard shift nurses, aides, and her friends to help her. She told them it was helping the elderly patients. So this is typical of medical murderers who are called angels of death. They believe that they are helping end their victims' suffering. However, it quickly shifted to more sinister. They sadly began to kill patients that they saw as annoying. Patients who were loud, unruly, had accidents in bed, wouldn't take their medicine, and were difficult were murdered by these 4 women.
Oh no, people who needed medical attention.
I know, like, old people can't control their bowel movements. Like, that's just so sad to me. And, like, they were mentally ill patients. Like, they're, like, some of them are going to be loud and unruly. But, like, as a nurse, like, you should be understanding and sympathetic to that. So, well, not even as a nurse, as a nurse's aide.
As someone who is, helping. You're supposed to, I don't know, help.
So they kind of thought that it was boring to just give these people injections, so they came up with a new murder method that they called the water cure. So one of them would hold down the victim, the other would hold the head still, and then mostly Wagner, but a few other times the other nurses did it, would pinch the victim's nose and pour water down their throat until they drowned. And that took, like, a lot of water because it has to, like, get into the flap in your neck and go into your lungs. So, like, they would be, like, choking on the water, like, cups and cups and cups, and, like, taking breaths and, like, gasping and stuff. So, like, it was, like, a long, drawn-out, like, murder method.
Water cure for life, I assume.
Like, it was just, like, absolutely, like,
Did no
brutal.
one notice? This had to have taken, like, at least 20 minutes.
I know, and, like, the beds were probably soaking with water.
And no one noticed?
Exactly. I mean, and some of them probably were screaming.
Yeah,
you know?
Why are these nurses holding me down? Help, help.
Yeah,
but if you're a psych patient...
You don't just, like, let someone drown you on dry land without screaming for help.
Right.
So actually that will come back, the lack of help. So Wagner's first victim was killed in 1983, and it wasn't until 1988 that people became suspicious about the number of deaths in Pavilion 5. So some of the victims, like their family members and stuff, were kind of like, they shouldn't be dead. Like, they were here because they were mentally ill, not sick. So why are they dead? And one of the ways that the water cure was so helpful with killing the elderly patients was a lot of elderly people have water in their lungs anyway. So if an autopsy was performed, it didn't look peculiar.
I would think
there would be a lot of water in the lungs.
So much water. Like, I know that old people have breathing issues and there's water in the lung, but it shouldn't just be a lung full of water.
Exactly. Like, it would probably be, like, just a little bit, like an inch. I don't know, but, like, to drown on dry land, you would have to be filled. Like, it's just so peculiar to me. So, what else? Okay. So their downfall came from a simple slip-up. So after work one day, they went to a local pub where the women sat socializing about their latest victim. Unbeknownst to them, a doctor from Lane's hospital was eavesdropping nearby. So he heard them talking about their latest killing, and he went right to the police that night. So the women were caught on April 7th, 1989. They killed 49 people, but the true number is believed to be over 200. Shockingly, all 4 of the women are free today. This case opened a heated debate about Austria's sentencing system and its flaws.
How do you get out of prison from killing, like, one person? I don't understand. Like, you kill one person, you should be in for life. They kill 49 and they're just out.
And maybe even 200. So, Wagner and Leidoff received life in prison, but they were released in 2008.
I don't think they know what life is.
They were only imprisoned for 19 years.
19 years is not life.
No. And then, interestingly, Meyer and Gruber were only sentenced to 20 and 15 years respectively. So as of 2008, all of the women were released because Meyer and Gruber got out early, obviously. As that happens.
If they're out today, that means they didn't die, which means it's not life, guys.
No, if you can walk out of prison, then you didn't get life in prison.
It's wild.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So that's... I have so many questions. Also, I just want to know how that doctor didn't shit himself while hearing all of this.
Exactly. I forgot to say. Oops. Okay, you just reminded me. The doctor that was overseeing them was actually arrested on negligence.
Good.
I can't find any information about his actual sentence, but he was arrested.
Well, at least that's something. I'm sure he got, 37 seconds in prison?
Exactly.
Well, that's exciting.
So that was our first episode.
So now we are going to use a number generator because I forgot my dice to figure out what we're going to do for next time.
Okay, so I'm hitting generate 17.
Number 17. And 17 is murders that take place in other countries.
Ooh, so any country that's not America.
Yep. So stay tuned for hopefully next week's episode of Murder by Numbers.
Thank you.